brief introduction. Lieutenant Jon Segroves is our lieutenant for the Albany, Georgia Police Department, and he oversees is it property crimes, LT, or persons? Property crimes. Okay, and tell us how long you've been with Albany Police Department.
I've been with Albany Police Department a little over 20 years. I've been in law enforcement a little over 30.
So
investigations almost 6 years now.
We love him to death. He does an excellent job. And I'm going to actually turn it over to Lieutenant Segroves and let him just give you all a little bit of background information about how he came to be and how much he just enjoys working in the investigations bureau, and give us some great information about identity theft. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Sonia. I am Jon Segroves. I actually started law enforcement back around 1989, just a little while ago. Worked for the sheriff's office for about 10 years, got out of it for a couple of years and came back to the police department, and have everything from riding a beat to riding horses to riding four-wheelers to working traffic, and then back to supervising officers. And then in 17, I moved up to investigations into the property crimes unit, and I've been here ever since. And I actually have a lot of fun up here, still enjoy what I do, still got a great crew to work with. So it makes it a good day every day I come up here. One of the things I do now is I supervise the property crimes unit, which consists of all your thefts, frauds, forgeries, burglaries, anything like that. And that's kind of what I do, is help these guys do what they do best. And one of the big things we have up here, we see a lot of, is financial thefts. Everything from credit cards to banking to embezzlement to you name it. So just going over several of the things that we see, and if you have a question, please ask me about it. One of the main types of theft that we run into up here, and that you'll see a lot, is the identity thefts. And usually this occurs when any of your personal information, social security number, date of birth, credit cards, banking information gets either leaked by a scam caller or gets hacked on the dark web, I guess is what they call it. But a lot of times you'll see this type of stuff happen. One of the ways to really keep a check on it is through your Equifax or TransUnion, things like that. If you're checking your credit report, you can keep an eye looking out for any unknown accounts that are opened in your name. A lot of people you've been approved for a credit card in the mail and they throw it in the trash. Well, there are people out there who dumpster dive and they go through your trash and they will find that information. Then they will open up accounts in your name. So that's kind of how you can see some of that and how you warn people. There have been instances lately where people in the health field are selling information on the dark web and things like that. So Cordial in that area just had a multi-million-dollar issue going on where there was in the tens of millions of dollars worth of identities and fraud done on stolen stuff from healthcare. So that's also something you need to look at. If you find bills that you're not familiar with, if you start seeing withdrawals from your account. My mother-in-law was in the hospital in November. While she was in the hospital, 2 withdrawals from her bank account were made up in Atlanta. So how they got her information, we still don't have any idea. We were able to track it down, but she was in the hospital during that time and we were able to get it locked down, stop the account, and go from there. So we don't know where all this comes from. There's people out there who have a lot more imagination than some of us. Where they get it from and how they do it, I just don't understand. So some of the things to look for is, when you're seeing withdrawals from your bank account that you're not familiar with. You don't have AT&T and you're all of a sudden paying an AT&T phone bill. You don't have MediaCom, you pay a MediaCom bill. You need to start looking at that and being real careful. When you start getting phone calls from debt collectors for your Verizon account and you've been with AT&T for 20 years, you're going to get those calls, and that's when you start realizing there may be a problem. Just all kind of stuff like that. And the ways to prevent it is, one, monitor your credit history, checking your bank statements regularly. As a matter of fact, you can set up your bank, have somebody set up your bank to where anytime something comes out, you get a notification. So if you start seeing those odd notifications, you know immediately you need to get on to whatever that is and start checking on it. You get your identity, the IRS will tell you, hey, you've already filed your taxes, or your child's already been claimed on taxes. And that's all part of the identity fraud. So you're going to see those type of things. Of course, now this time of year, we're fixing to start seeing more phone calls about my child's already been claimed on somebody's taxes and, I hadn't filed my taxes. So it's not just grown-ups whose identity are stolen, it's also children. So you need to be aware of those type of things and looking for those type of things. If you think your identity's been stolen, you can contact the credit bureaus. You can put freezes on your account. You can contact the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission. And a lot of times they will give you a PIN number, a personal identification number that, you can use and have available to do that. But you're allowed free credit reports and things like that. So keep those things in mind when you're doing that. One of the main things that we investigate is credit and debit card fraud. And a lot of this comes from when we have entering autos or burglaries, things like that. They start stealing your credit cards, or you go through a drive-through, you give them your debit card, they step off to what you think is ring it up, and a lot of times they may be taking a snapshot of your credit card or your debit card. So if at all possible, keep it in sight, keep it in mind, use cash when you go out to eat if at all possible. It's not a bad idea. Or eat where, I'm not going to say you trust everybody, because maybe everybody, a more familiar place to go that you frequent. The Burger Kings, McDonald's, Taco Bells, and things like that. We've worked many cases where folks have gone through Taco Bell, got supper, and the next thing they know, they're spending money and all over the country on the computer. So that's one of the things we see. If you start trying to get into your accounts and realize that you'll see $1 charge up in Ohio, or you'll see a 59-cent charge out in California. When you start seeing those charges, those are things you need to then start contacting your banks, your credit card, your debit card people, whoever you do that, and let them know. Usually when you see these dollar figures, it's just somebody testing the waters to see if they can get into your account. And sometimes you'll go to places and they put $1 on there just to start it, but you need to know, did I go to that place? Or I've not been to Sam's Smoke Shop in Cincinnati, Ohio, but there's $1 charge there. So, and that's one of the ways when you start getting alerts on your banking account, if you can monitor your banking account when it spends, that's an easy way to know that you've not been there. Just had 2 real close friends, it's happened to them. So, I mean, they shut their credit cards down immediately, and luckily they weren't hit for any more than that. One of the things people don't realize is when you do use credit cards, it's a lot easier to dispute and things like that than debit cards. So if you're able to use credit cards, use credit cards. But yeah, if you don't know the name of the company, don't recognize the name of the company, it would be a real good idea to start looking into it and seeing what's going on. If you don't recognize, the charge, or you may not remember you have a reoccurring charge. Sometimes they just get shut down for simple things like that. If people call you, hey, I need you, I'm Joe Smith with ABC Bank, and I need you to verify your information. Banks don't call to verify credit card and debit card information. They have your information, so they're not going to call you and ask you these questions. And a lot of the fraud is done against the elderly and things like that. So file the complaint with your bank, ask for the affidavits, be able to provide that information to law enforcement when you do those type of crimes or whatever committed against you. Make sure you have your information available so you can provide it to them so they can fully investigate it. If you start seeing drop in your accounts like that, start looking into it. The robocalls, I know we've experienced a lot. Had one the other day where somebody was calling from the federal government, and it was on Martin Luther King Day. Well, everybody knows the government shut down that day. Ain't nobody working, but now you're calling, I'm from the whatever bureau, and you're going, no, I don't believe so, because it's a holiday and even the banks are closed. So I don't think anybody's calling. So be aware of the dates that they call, when they call, listen in the background for a lot of chatter. I was listening to some, they call my mother-in-law a lot. And in the background, I can hear 6 more people talking about doing things. So it just is, if it don't look right or sound right, feel right, it probably ain't right, so pay attention to those type of things. So if you're not signed up for something or whatever, the unsolicited calls, don't give them any information. Especially if they call and ask you for your social security numbers, bank account numbers like that. It needs to be a trusted source, and you should always be able to call. If it's Chase Bank calling you, you should always be able to say, well, let me call you back. Provide me with, and then don't call back the number they give you. They're going to give you a number to come back into their call center. Go to Chase's website, look it up, call them, say, hey, have y'all called me about anything? And that's a very easy way to dispel any suspicious calls. Some of the ones that we see really the elderly get is what they call the grandparent scam. There's been a lot of people we've seen, hey, this is Joe with ABC bonding, and your grandchild was involved in a wreck and the other party was hurt, and we need you to send $4,000 on Apple iTunes cards to get them out of jail or whatever. Well, one of the big clues there is if your grandchild ain't calling you. And the other thing is, when you start being asked to go get money on some type of a card and then give them the information for the card, once you give them the information off the back of that card and they access it, it's gone. The money is then gone. They do it and then they'll call back and say, hey, the party was injured, we need another $2,000. When you talk to your constituents and all that, anybody you deal with, and they'll be familiar with this. We've had numerous ones in Albany. Tell them to call the grandchild. Does the grandchild even live in that area? Would the grandchild even be in that area for anything? That I don't understand. I guess I've been in this so long, I don't understand why people think that, but they never verify the fact of the grandchild possibly having being involved in anything. So those are just some of the things. The romance scam, we've had one recently. where I think a lady's gone through about $250,000 right now, sending it to somebody she's never met, never seen, but they're romancing them on the computer on all these websites and dating sites and stuff like that. They'll call and promise this and promise that, and it's really, it preys upon usually the elderly, mostly elderly females. They'll be on a dating site or they'll find companionship and they need money for this or money for that. Be aware of where, they need to understand that if they're asking you to go get Apple cards or whatever, the one we've had recently is they were sent a check, and next thing they know, they take the check to the bank, then they start withdrawing $10,000 and $20,000 from this check, but they don't know where the check came from, so that they could send it to this person. Those are they're just straight up scams, especially against the elderly. Sweepstakes scam, if you've won $200 million in the Nigerian lottery and they're asking you for $15,000 so they can send it to them, my answer was always, well, you just take about 20,000 out for your trouble and send me the rest. So you're not going to win a sweepstake you've never entered. You're not going to win anything you've never been involved in. Nobody's calling you to give you free money. That really just does not happen. So just, those are things to tell them to be aware of. To protect yourself, you'll see online scams where they'll send you an email, you've won $800,000 from a company. Well, look at how the company spells their name. Truist Bank is TRUIST. Well, the scam may be TRUEST. So you need to look at the spellings and how things are done. Go back and look at that. That's some of the main things you see, especially with the scam emails or the phishing emails where they're attempting to get information from you. Or a lot of times, and I've seen them, hey, you owe $800 to this company for something, and if you don't send it in, the sheriff will be at your door tomorrow to arrest you, so you need to pay now. Those are some of the typical scams I've seen. I've gotten invoices from motorcycle places. Even though I did ride a motorcycle, I never bought anything like that. So just don't take everything at face value, especially through computers, through phone calls, and that type of stuff. That's some of the main types of scams that we're seeing right now. And some of the main ways to protect yourself is just be aware, be cognizant of what's going on. I don't know if y'all have any questions about some of the things that we see on a regular basis as far as for businesses and things like that. Advise them to get regularly, yearly audits on their businesses. We've had in the last year, we've had probably 3 cases come up that have gone anywhere from $100,000 to $400,000 worth of money being scammed by the office managers or people who have access to accounts. They're paying their own bills, they're coding it differently. They're paying out of different accounts, or they're just, one is somebody's paying their own insurance for their own vehicles out of the business account, paying their debit cards, their dentist, and funding. A lot of times this goes back to funding a lifestyle people can't afford that they're doing. So if you're talking to people who run businesses, own businesses, have businesses, they really need to make sure and not trust whoever's running their books, because if they're, as they call it, cooking the books, and you don't pay attention to it, it may be 2 or 3 years before you realize you're being hit for several $100,000. And that creates a whole lot of work for you to have to find. And those are some of the main points of, how to not be a victim. The big things that you need to do is stay on top of your credit bureau information. Free credit reporting is out there. You can sign up for it. Look at your bank accounts, look at your bank statements, that type of stuff. Miss Patricia, y'all got anything other thing that you're really looking to find out about? Or
This
Miss
information is absolutely great, and we thank you for it. One of the things I've heard, someone even mentioned this morning, where they were being fished for what they thought was a simple thing, but it was they were going after their Medicare number, and I think that's what we feel now as well.
And my mother-in-law has had a lot of issues lately and a lot of medical issues lately, and I've kind of taken over a lot of that. And I get Medicare, Medicaid, people calling, wanting information, and I'm just, and that was one of the people, I think, calling on a federal holiday. And I'm like, dude, you don't even realize what today is. And we're seeing, a lot of that, especially if people are in facilities and things like that, and they really don't have access to their own finances. They need to be aware. Somebody needs to keep an eye on their finances. Find somebody who is, able to look into that type of stuff. And there is a lot of Medicare, Medicaid fraud going on. I mean, it's a lot of times the government may be more the victim than the person, but depending on what type of care or help they're receiving from different companies, it could be that their own personal accounts are being taken, are being accessed, and fraud occurring on them. So we're probably working one now that's going to have, I don't even know how many victims, through this one company, but that's part of what we see. So, one of the things is an advocate. Always have an advocate for you, somebody who can look into your stuff. Keep somebody who can double check it, especially as they either get older or have other issues. Have that advocate double checking their finances, making sure that somebody else can make sure that they're safe.
Dr. Johnson, you have anything?
I'm sorry. LT, you talked a little bit about how important it was to check your credit report regularly. And so sometimes just in, with my background experience and knowledge just in this area, having previously worked for the AG's office in the state of Kansas in the Consumer Fraud Division, a lot of people will only check one credit bureau and think that if that one credit bureau's report appears to be accurate, then everything is all good. So can you give us a little bit of
you have three, I believe it's three separate ones. There's Equifax, TransUnion, and I honestly could not tell you the third one off the top of my head because my wife really keeps an eye on that.
It's Experian. Equifax, TransUnion, Experian.
Experian, that's it. I knew I'd heard it, I just couldn't remember it. But each one really has a different criteria for what they report. Each one has different information. So, and you're entitled to, you can sign up for them, and you're entitled to so many checks a year free, I believe, through each one. Mm-hmm. So you need to check all of them. If you're going to check, anything. It's kind of like watering the plants. Just don't water the first one you get to and think the rest of them will be good. Check them all. You know, water all the plants. Check all the credit bureau reports, because they all have different things. Why that is, that's beyond me, but each one will provide some type of a different information. And so you need to make sure. And one of the odd things is your mail that comes in, you get something, oh, I don't have anything to do with Kohl's department store, so you throw that away. Well, it may be because somebody has opened a Kohl's account in your name. And, you know, just things like that. But Ms. Johnson, you're right. You know, all the credit bureaus need to be checked, and all of them will provide so many free per year. So just keeping up with your own business is great.
You also mentioned the increase or the rise in identity theft as it relates to your health information. And I know that just like with the credit bureaus, your health is stored in a system called the MIB, the Medical Information Bureau, and everybody is able to draw your information from the MIB. So that repository is a good resource to keep up with what's going on with your medical information as well, just making sure that it's accurate as well.
That's true. And one of the things that with all the demons we have with like GBI and other people, and some of the help we provide them and they provide us, that we learned is that unfortunately there's unscrupulous people in the medical business, hospitals and things like that, who will sell your information. And when they get that stuff out on the dark web or whatever, and you good and well know that once you go to the hospital, they're going to want to know if you want to keep a credit card on file, if you want to keep an account on file, or if you're even paying through a regular account. They've got that accessible information is out there. And, you know, that's kind of how some of that goes on. It's people out there looking for ways to make a dollar. And, you know, when you're doing multi-million-dollar frauds, it reaches everywhere. I mean, every business I know of has been a victim, including the city of Albany. You get an email that says Pat Smith needs you to pay this invoice immediately or by 2 o'clock, and it's got to be paid. And Pat Smith actually works there. But if you look, it may be the email address will be incorrect or something will be wrong. You always have to go back and verify, especially when urgent issues come up wanting your money. You need to be able to verify that these things are legitimate, correct, and coming from the right people. And that's some of the phishing emails that they send out. And that's how they get into your money.
Should people carry their Social Security cards and their health insurance cards? I know we all do it, but would you advise that on a day-to-day basis, you know, when we go and we pack our purses and check our wallets, that those are items that we should regularly carry on our person?
Well, it's a two-edged sword. Yes, you do need them, because if you were to have a medical emergency somewhere, you need to have that information to provide to the immediate care facility you go to. If you don't carry it, then and something happens, then you may have a delay in things. I think you'll still be able to be treated, but the delay in the paperwork, the process and all that, it creates another problem. So you need to guard what you carry. don't leave your wallet in the front of the buggy at Walmart and turn around and go 2 aisles over looking at dish towels or whatever. Guard what, if you're going to carry information, you need to guard that information also. That's just to being vigilant with your own belongings. Just the same way as leaving your wallet or purse or whatever in the car with all your information and your credit cards. I mean, we see it, but I don't leave $10,000. I ain't got $10,000, but I don't leave $10,000 in the glove box of my car and then go inside for the weekend and think it's going to be there Monday morning when I come back. It's just the common sense rule has a lot to do with things.
Are there, I know in the state of Kansas, they are very, they take crimes against the elderly very seriously, so much so that they have passed legislation that increases the penalties on crimes against the elderly. Does the state of Georgia recognize that?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a case I worked not long ago where, and it comes to do with fraudulent checks and fraudulent money orders. A young man went to one of the local credit union banks, couldn't cash a money order. So he saw an elderly gentleman and asked him, hey, look, I can't get this cashed. Will you cash it for me? And I'll just give you a few dollars for helping me. Well, unfortunately, that gentleman was, I believe ours starts at 60 older, of the 65 and older, describes elderly. So he cashed it for him. Well, it was a fraudulent money order. So the bank took the money out of the elderly man's account because he's the one that cashed it. So when I went after the young guy that did it, I actually charged him with a charge. And because the victim was 65 and older, it was automatically a felony. It doesn't matter if it's $5 or $5,000. We do have statutes dealing with the abuse or the financial crimes against elderly, and it is an enhanced penalty and all that. So most of the time, if you're defrauding the elderly, it automatically becomes a felony. So Georgia does take that very serious. They have a lot of statutes in place for that, and we use those statutes when applicable.
Great. What about dead people?
That one's really kind of hard. I mean, if you're stealing the identity of a dead person, it's a different type of investigation. It's very similar, but you would actually be going after the estate of the deceased person and anybody who's left as a trustee, because the deceased is not harmed. It's the trust or the estate or whatever that would be harmed. So it's a little bit different than just being elderly, but you do have people using identity of deceased people from 1 month to 100 years old. It doesn't matter to them. They'll steal their identity. You can walk through the graveyard, find a tombstone of somebody who's very young, assume that identity and go. And it happens more often than people believe.
So in those cases, what do families do to protect against that? Say if something were to happen to me, what would my daughter do to ensure that somebody wasn't using my identity to do all kinds of other things?
I think you would still be able to check the credit bureaus, credit reporting companies, because if Sally Smith died in 97 and she's getting new credit cards in 2003, the family should be able to notify law enforcement where somebody has an identity theft going on, and they should be able to do that. We just had a case from 2020, I believe, where a gentleman's identity was stolen. They opened up multiple loans and all that, rental cars, many things, Well, because they had taken his identity and created it, all the charges were coming back to that gentleman. Well, he was able to provide information showing where his identity had been stolen and all this other stuff was done. So it cleared him. And it would very well be the same with living and deceased. You just have to be able to prove, what's what. I mean, to help through the court system, the death certificate of Sally Smith would be a crucial piece of evidence. So the family still need to be aware if you start seeing mail or start seeing bills in people's name that are no longer living, then that's time to start looking into it. Especially if you start getting collections from them, calls in reference to, Sally Smith has a Kohl's account that's got, $10,000 on it and we need a payment. And that's when you would start realizing what was going on.
Excellent. Any other questions? No other questions? Okay, well, LT, we're not going to hold you. We're going to let you go and go off and be great.
Thank you, ma'am. And y'all
Thank you so much.
Well, thank y'all for the opportunity and y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
And we appreciate all those that took the time out today to join us to receive that valuable information on identity theft. And we're going to go ahead and I'm sorry, Ms. Edwards, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, I do not. I think we have our marching orders for what we're preparing for and what we are doing. It may be that we may have an executive sometime along the way if necessary, but I don't have any. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for all that you've done in working to get this together today. Thank you so much. And big shout out to Mrs. Barbara Reddick. She did notify us that she could not be on because of previous conflict and obligation, but otherwise she would have been here. So just a shout out to her. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Do you want to give just a little announcement on our save the date on our upcoming annual conference?
Certainly, thank you. We're having the second Tuesday in May, and that date is the 9th. May the 9th. We're having our annual housing conference, and it certainly is going to be power-packed and wonderful. We're looking forward to some great things happening. And I think our theme is going to be housing in a post-pandemic world. I believe that is correct, right, Dr. Johnson? Am I right?
Yes.
Y'all help me out. I'm making sure I'm looking at the right stuff. And it is going to be held here in Albany, Georgia, at the Albany Museum of Art. It's going to be all day. It's about 9. We're going to have breakfast and lunch is going to be served. And we're going to have many speakers dealing with some very important issues that's coming together very well. And so don't hesitate to go ahead and get your name on the list to be a part of that. It's going to be a wonderful power-packed day. We're working very hard on it, and we're looking forward to seeing a good number of people in the places. The first time we're having it in Albany since the pandemic. And so we want to in person. So we're looking forward to that.
And it's a free event.
It is free.
Free event. So
It is free so far as you don't have to pay anything. Somebody's putting some money in it, but it's definitely free and open to the public. So.
Come one, come all. So thank you to our guests who joined us this afternoon, and we're going to go ahead and close for the day. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, a wonderful rest of the week. So thank you so much.